Hello, it is a Tuesday, which means it's time for another in real life video. And this week we are actually covering something a little bit more topical, something that's kind of been in the news in the, I don't know, video game sphere, as it were. But don't let that dissuade you from not submitting a general viewer question if you would like. As always, feel free to do so in the comments below. It helps a ton for me if you include a question mark, and I'll add it to our ever-growing list. But this week, I wanted to talk about the rumored, I feel like we're a little bit beyond rumors now, but the Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion remake or remaster. This was in the news recently as more people who sort of claim to have contacts, claim to have some wherewithal, said that it's going to come fairly soon, within 2 months at most, right? Those are the current estimates, either sometime this month or sometime in April. I would guess probably at this point, given that we're about halfway through, a little bit more halfway through this month, probably be April, right? But who can say for sure? But at the very least, they're sort of saying that from the point at which it is announced, it will come out. Here, I should be using this hand. From the point at which it is announced, it will release shortly thereafter. With some folks even saying that they may do like a shadow drop, which would be really wild, and that would be a sort of them announcing that it exists formally, and then it proceeding to come out like the same day, you know? Which, I don't know, typically when you do that, I feel like you have another announcement alongside it, and this is sort of like the big whatever that you throw in. I don't know, but it sounds like it's definitely happening soon. If you would have asked me, I would have said it would have been around the time of Summer Games Fest, which we're just barely entering spring as it is. So, we'll see. But I do think, I wanted to talk about here, of course, and this is sort of, we're no stranger to this, to the concept of this Oblivion remake or remaster, because I think it was a few years ago now. I think it was 2023. Right? I checked not too long ago to try and get the dates nailed. I really should have written it down, but I think it was 2023 when we had heard sort of the first rumblings about this even existing. And that was through the official court proceedings when Microsoft formally bought, at the time it was Bethesda, right? Not just Bethesda Game Studios, but everything sort of under their purview. That would have been id, that would have been Machine Games, and among others that are not with us anymore. But for the Bethesda stuff, they sort of had this timeline, and of course, a lot of the timeline, it was a bit of an older document, right? So parts of it, I think, were worth bearing in mind that they would be inaccurate. And, of course, as development schedules sort of go along, would become only more inaccurate. But so far, if you go back to that leaked document that came out, like I said, in fairly officious terms from that court proceeding or whatever, you could see that a lot of it lines up. There is stuff involving various projects that you could map out. Obviously, stuff like Redfall is on there, and you would have to assume that any follow-up projects that have unannounced names or whatever from that same studio, since they all got laid off, would not be on the list. Same with what's their name, Tango Gameworks, I think, the folks who did what was it, the really fun rhythm platformer action combat game. Oh my god, what was it called? They all also got laid off, right? They previously did The Evil Within. I think it was Tango Gameworks, wasn't it? Nonetheless, any project that they would have been working on. Obviously, if that was on the list as one of those unlisted, one wouldn't be on there. But there are other things that would change names, like, for instance, Doom the Dark Ages, which I want to say was on there listed as, like, Doom Year Zero, Era Zero, Age Zero, something like that, which, from what we can tell from, like, pre-release material that's come out on a more official basis, we can sort of see, like, yeah, that's kind of the intent behind Doom the Dark Ages and all of that. So bearing in mind differences with names, differences in, like, timelines for completing stuff, obviously already the dates on this are off by, like, 2-3 years, like I said, thanks to, like, general drift when it comes to development time. And, you know, we had some, on a global scale, some stuff going on for a year or two or so that impacted a lot of people's work and usually slowed it down, it tended to be. That was no difference here. But regardless, it seems like it's for real. It's really happening. The real question, I think, is the extent to which it exists, right? On that document, mind you, it is listed as a remaster and not a remake, which a remaster would just be mostly like graphical improvements, right? Better graphics in some form or another, right? Which I think also is worth bearing repeating with air quotes, better graphics, and various other, like, stability issues would be fixed, I would assume, right? I'm guessing you probably wouldn't run into the A-bomb animation error if you have a save that goes on for long enough. You wouldn't need to, like, bash your save file, as it were. Look, if you know, you know. Regardless, we have also had more recently folks saying that it might be like a full remake, right? Which we do know, in a sense, it is definitely a remake, because they're not just doing it in Creation Engine 2, right? Which would be what Starfield is running off of, what Elder Scrolls 6, as far as we know, Elder Scrolls 6 will be running off of it. And it's not running off of any, like, souped up version of Gamebryo, which is what Oblivion was originally done on. It's going to be running on Unreal Engine, right? UE5, which I think is super weird and fascinating, and sort of, this is at the crux of the reason for this video, is to sort of, like, consider and think about expectations for this. Like, what exactly are we thinking is going to be going on here? Part of me is already bracing for impact with this. As someone who really enjoyed Oblivion on PC, I actually don't know how necessary it is to have a remaster or a remake, right? I think it runs pretty well, right? I think, barring critical issues like the A-bomb animation error, barring, like, save corruptions, stuff like that, I thought it still holds up. I think it still looks really good on PC, even baseline, without any mods whatsoever. I still think it looks pretty dang good. That a lot of that is owed to the fact that a lot of the graphical options on PC you can scale upward, right? Obviously fidelity is a big one, but so too is, like, draw distance on things, right? If you crank up draw distance on everything to absolute maximum on PC, it looks pretty dang good, right? It looks fine to me, right? I remember going around playing it and being like, wow, this is what a gorgeous scene I've come across, or whatever, right? But nonetheless, I must sort of brace expectations here with this, because not only, I think, as well, going back a little bit, there will be those who, of course, say, oh, well, was BGS, Bethesda Game Studios, doing remastering Oblivion when they should be working on Elder Scrolls 6 or even Fallout 5 at this point? You will get no shortage of people saying this. People who don't understand, I don't know, what's going on, right? To get ahead of this, I will say here, they aren't working on it, right? As far as we know, they have very little involvement in this. I would assume there might be some amount of like consultation, or like if they wanted, I don't know, something on the back end of the game, maybe they would provide that, which I would probably include under like consulting. Someone from BGS sort of consulting with this other development team, because it is another development team. It's another studio. BGS has pretty much nothing to do with this as far as we know, aside from them working from their base. It is Virtuos Paris, I believe, is the studio who have, I looked into them. They've done a lot of similar projects, sort of like either working on like increasing graphical fidelity on older games, or sort of being contracted out to work on stuff too, right? Like ports or other things like that. Like, for instance, a good example of this within this same purview would be the Skyrim Switch port, right? To get Skyrim running on the Nintendo Switch, they contracted Iron Galaxy Studios, and they are pretty much the studio that is chiefly responsible for getting Skyrim running on the Nintendo Switch, right? It wasn't so much Bethesda Game Studios that did that. More so, they contracted another studio to do that work. And of course, this is, if you're familiar at all with the back end of game dev, even if you don't have any direct experience in it, like myself, you will know that this happens fairly regularly, because you want your main dev teams, or team, singular, depending on your size, working on the next whatever, right? And in this case, that would be Elder Scrolls 6 and pre-production on like Fallout 5, I presume. As well as Starfield DLC, I believe, right? We've got the Starborn DLC, which is purportedly we're meant to hear some more news about later this year, I guess. But all of that is to say, I am going into it, I'm looking forward to this Oblivion remake or remaster, depending on how much they do, but I'm definitely like being wary of it, right? I can't help but think of when, was it Blue Point or Blue Hole? I forget who did the remake of Demon's Souls, right? And I have admittedly limited experience with Demon's Souls, but I definitely remember some like Demon's Souls, I don't know, super fans, truthers, ultra lovers, or whatever, talking about how, yeah, it is very competent. I am very much enjoying it, but the soul of the game, you know, it's a little bit of a weird word to use here in this connotation for a game called Demon's Souls, but, you know, the soul of the game felt different, right? There were like minor changes in areas wherein, you know, maybe this corridor would be lit up differently. Maybe the design of this creature would be slightly different. And all of that, like one by one at a time, taken individually, you know, it gives you, it's easy enough to think like, oh, it's not too big of a deal. But taken all together, it can kind of change and alter your perception and the entire vibe of the product as a whole, right? The entire game as a whole, you know? Sort of the sum of its parts is separate from each part taken individually, or whatever the turn of phrase is. And I do have some expectation that we will see that present here, right? Which, as a person playing the game on PC, I don't know how much I mind that, given the fact that regular Oblivion is still fully playable today, right? I think it would be different if regular Oblivion, as we know it, just were not playable. Like, we just couldn't play it for whatever reason, either through, you know, it's just not compatible with the current version of Windows or whatever, right? There was a period where, like, Fallout 3 had major compatibility issues because of its Games for Windows Live. and you had to really go around with modding it in that sense. But even then, it was still playable in a certain sense of the word, right? You really had to jump through some hoops, but you could get it working. In that sense, I don't know if I mind too much, and if anything, maybe I do like the idea of it being a very different experience, right? Not all too dissimilar from the idea of putting Oblivion in Skyrim's Creation Engine 1, right? Which there is the Skyblivion team, which, as far as I know, is still planning to release its full conversion mod, which turns Skyrim entirely into the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. And I've also seen and heard from directly folks who have some concerns about whether or not that mod will still be able to exist. And just to sort of reiterate here and get it all in one place, I think it'll be totally fine. Sort of looking at Microsoft's track record, I think Microsoft is the main vector of which to be concerned, and they seem to have a very, very, like, hands-off approach. And I've joked before, like, except when it comes to layoffs, right? If you don't perform well enough to their standard, then they will just lay off your entire team. But as far as getting actively involved in development, they don't really, right? We've seen this with stuff like Minecraft, which is ridiculously successful, and only just now, I think, maybe this year or late last year, have started like increasing the speed at which they update the game. But otherwise, we're kind of going at like a snail's pace. But yeah, they have a fairly hands-off approach to their various studios. BGS themselves, they're continually on record saying that they don't mind and that they very much encourage the modding scene, right? So I don't think we have anything to worry about in that regard. And also, taking a further step back and thinking about it, I think that this is more meant for like console crowd, right? I think that this is something that that is made with the intent of appealing to people playing on console. I think people on PC will of course play it, especially if you have like Game Pass or whatever, because I'm assuming it will just come out on there. I'm assuming it will just be on Game Pass, right? I don't think that's a wild assumption to make. But I think this is predominantly for people playing on consoles. And of course, in this era, Microsoft and Xbox are more than happy to get their exclusives on PlayStation, right? I think at this point, it's a foregone conclusion that this will eventually come to PlayStation platforms, right? Will it be the same day? Probably not. But given the fact that it's running off of UE5, I think I think you could very safely assume that it will also, assuming it sees the light of day, which it really sounds like it is, you could very safely assume that it will be coming to the current generation and probably future PlayStation games or platforms, right? Maybe even Switch 2? I don't know. It depends on the fidelity of this game, right? Of like just how much they decide to amp it up graphically speaking. I guess you could see it on Switch 2. Who could say, right? That's maybe the biggest mystery of all. But yeah, when it comes to PlayStation, I'm fully expecting it to show up there, probably at a later date. As far as other expectations along those lines, similarly on this leaked document, right? The court hearing stuff that came out, we saw Fallout 3 remastered, right? I assume, and I think it was a 2 or 3 year difference between them. I would assume, given the fact that they're porting stuff over from Gamebryo, the same engine that Bethesda used for Oblivion, I assume that they will do that as well for Fallout 3. And, of course, there was a third game that sort of famously ran off of Gamebryo, that being Fallout New Vegas. This was not on the timeline presented in those court documents that came out. However, I think that's simply because they didn't go that far in the future, right? I think there's 100% a good chance that we see a Fallout New Vegas remaster show up as well. 2 or 3 years after this Oblivion one. Maybe sooner. It depends on how that work is done, right? If you lay the groundwork for it, is it a lot easier to sort of pump out another one? I don't know, right? Are they building off of similar to the way that BGS built off of the foundation that they had with making Oblivion to make Fallout 3, and then conversely, Obsidian used that foundation to make New Vegas. Will they do the same here? It remains to be seen, but I would imagine that they have a very successful Fallout TV show, wherein when season 1 of that thing dropped, they saw a shockingly, nobody really expected it to go that way, but they saw a shocking increase in popularity for their Fallout games across the board, right? Even myself, who has like a backlog of videos about Fallout, I saw significant ticks up across the board from the more contemporary Fallout videos and stuff that I've made to the CRPGs. Everything got like a significant uptick around the time that the show was hitting. I would assume that we will see something similar, probably a bit less because it's season 2. It's not like the premiere season and all of that. Unless, I don't know, maybe it's so good that viewership increases, right? But I don't know. Maybe because of my like background in games more so, having more experience playing games and all of that, I go into it with an assumption that there will be some measure of dwindling, right? But make no mistake, there's plenty of TV shows that do grow in viewership over time, right? It definitely happens. If anything, I think it's more common to happen there with television, right? So entirely within the realm of possibility that we see another big bump like that, and it would make sense that they would want to time a sort of re-release of some sort of those games along with the TV show, right? Or at least try and time it out in that sense, right? We know for a fact that Microsoft has been pressuring BGS in some fashion or another, right? They're on record saying that they really would like them to have more Fallout coming out, especially, like I said, the TV show hitting in such a way. They've talked more about getting other studios to also work on it, which, I don't know, leads me to believe, like, are they going to get Obsidian involved? I don't know if you noticed, but they rehired, what's his name? What is his name? John Gonzalez, I think? James Gonzalez? I forget. One of the head writers for New Vegas, Obsidian recently rehired. I forgot what he was doing or where he was at, but they recently got him back on board just, I don't know, a month or so ago. I don't know, a lot of curious things going on. But that said, all that is neither here nor there. We're sort of focused on Oblivion for the meanwhile. Which, I don't know, when is Oblivion's actual anniversary? I'm not even sure. Maybe it is coming up and they're going to time it with that. Regardless, I'm excited for it and very much looking forward to it, but I don't think it will be like necessarily a full replacement for regular Oblivion. It will simply be another way to play it, right? And probably a good way to play it if you're on console, right? And you don't have access to mods or even various graphical fidelity options that you can scale up, like I was talking about with view distance. It could just be another way to do it. And from the sounds of it, there were people who were purporting that it will play a bit differently, right? Right, stuff like archery will function differently. Stuff with regards to enemy hit reactions, all of that. And that really makes me wonder, like, how much are they changing, right? How much are they changing and how much are they going to even be able to replicate, right? Because kind of a big part, a big unmistakable part of Oblivion is that it's really charming and goofy, right? It is aged incredibly well and has kind of taken on this, like, I don't know, this goofball kind of place in everybody's hearts where, yeah, sometimes it gets a little a little stupid at times, but you kind of can't help but love it for that, right? The ways in which a lot of the NPCs look kind of silly and potato-like, you know? The ways in which characters ragdoll around and get caught on stuff. It all kind of meshes and works together in tandem. This is stuff that we've remarked upon a ton in the playthrough years ago now. But all of that working together in tandem, the voice deliveries, the ways in which the script was written and all of that, it all kind of comes together to make such a unique, like we had talked about, unique soul for the game, right? And I don't know their ability to replicate that, especially a different studio. I think that would be very difficult, and thus I'm not even sure if they're going to try to do it, right? I think it will have a different type of soul. In the same vein that I would say something like a Skyblivion would have, right? That we know for a fact will play a lot more similar to Skyrim compared to Oblivion, right? It will look different, you know? It will have a different soul. I don't think something like this purported remaster or remake or Skyblivion necessarily invalidate the existence of, I don't know what you would call it, Oblivion Prime, right? Normal Oblivion. I don't think it invalidates its existence. It's just a different way to play it. And frankly, I look forward to playing them all on the channel at some point or another, and we'll sort of explore the intricacies of it. Like I said, especially it being made in a different engine, I'm very, very curious to see just how much of, like, that 2000s Gamebryo engine they'll be able to replicate in UE5. Because mind you, Bethesda's engine, for as much flack as it gets, it is very specifically made with these sorts of sandbox, immersive sim-like role-playing game experiences in mind, right? You have all these different systems running around in the background. Like, for instance, in Fallout 3, where I'm playing Fallout 3 just lately on the channel, but I explicitly remember it happening in Oblivion 2. If you're doing a quest or whatever, an NPC says like, oh, I'll meet you wherever in this town here down the road or whatever, or halfway across the map. If you pop open your quest tracker and you like wait hours or whatever, you will physically see them like moving along through the game world, right? In some fashion or another, like the game is tracking their movement throughout the game space, right? And you can go out there and meet them along the way in their journey. Like, for instance, without spoilers, there's a point in Fallout 3 where you encounter your dad, and your dad will travel across, like, I don't know, 75% of the map to go to a city, and while he's doing that, it's actually taking some measure of time, and you can run into him as he is out there if he hasn't yet reached that destination. It's really wild and kind of like unnecessary to the experience. But once again, like I said, it's those unnecessary things that kind of make the beauty of that sandbox experience, that immersive sim-like role-playing game experience, that's kind of integral to it. In the same way as like something simple that we take for granted in these games is the physics, right? Just being able to physically interact with all of the crap laying around, you know? Like, I can't help but think, how many Unreal engines contend with not even Starfield, but Oblivion's Gamebryo, right? When it comes to rendering out physicsable objects in a space, right? Like having, I don't know, NPCs that you can ragdoll around, having like shelves and shelves of books and like little crystal balls and platters and forks and knives and junk like that just littered about the place that you can just send flying with a single like lightning bolt. You know, I love doing that in the Oblivion playthrough. Is that going to be possible in UE5? I'm so curious if they're going to be able to replicate it. Obviously, you know, UE5 is pretty advanced, right? Unreal Engine 5, pretty advanced. It's got a lot of stuff going on. But I'm so curious about on a mechanical level. Like, I'm already going into it assuming like it will feel and like the soul of it will be very similar, right? They'll have, well, or will be very dissimilar, I should say. they'll have all the same trappings of like voice acting and whatnot, as far as we know. But, you know, all the characters will look incredibly different, I assume, all the environments and all of that. It will, I assume it won't have sort of that telltale Oblivion bloom, if you know what I'm talking about, where everything in Oblivion has this kind of like softened bloom, and like all of the edges feel a lot softer, right? Even just thinking of like the Iliad ruins, right? And how they have this like soft white luminescent glow to them. The edges on everything is so like curved and like softened down. It's very particular. And like I said, it weirdly meshes with, like, for instance, all of the characters who have like these sort of more softened features, right? It's such a unique vibe in games itself. I have to assume that will be different, but so too do I wonder, on a system level, how many of the sandbox bits will they have incorporated into this? Like I said, when it comes to UE5, I can't really think of anything that comes that close to Oblivion, and a lot of that also falls at the feet of there are very few people making sandbox role-playing games, immersive sim role-playing games, at the same level that BGS does, right? This is sort of a long thing that I've kind of held, is like, I don't mind other people sort of taking a swing at also making these games, because there's hardly anyone else making this type of sandbox RPG. Certainly with the amount of systems that they have, right? It's such a rarity. And I do wonder, will this actually just lean into more being like an action role-playing game than like an immersive sandbox experience, right? I'm very, very curious about that. Like at base level, I have to assume, thanks to Unreal Engine 5, it will probably have way more lockdown modding, right? I would have to assume. You know, like I don't imagine the modding will be quite as simple as it is for Gamebryo or for like Creation Engine 1 or 2, right? Which are kind of made with that modding experience in mind being incorporated into it. I don't know. I'm so curious about on a technical level. But rest assured, I 100% think it's going to exist, and I will absolutely be playing it on the channel. Like I said, I'm really looking forward to it, even on just like an academic level, right? Having played so much of Oblivion itself and enjoyed it so much, I'm so fascinated by the concept at all. And I assume that depending on how this goes down, the work will continue with a Fallout 3 version of this, a New Vegas version of this, right? Any of the stuff on this version of Gamebryo, which would be Fallout 3 and New Vegas, we will see ported over to UE5 in some form or another. Very, very weird, very wild, right? That it is a completely separate dev team as well working on it. I don't know. There's a lot going on here. I'm so eager to see it and to see people dig into it, right? In some ways, I am more. Yeah, you know what? Here. Let's close out with a bit of a hot take. I think I might be more, technically enthused or excited on a technical level for what they're going to do with this than I might be with Elder Scrolls 6, right? Because having played and playing so much Starfield, I kind of get the idea of like what is possible. You know, how many of us have seen people in Starfield like flying over New Atlantis, spawning in a gajillion milk cartons or whatever, right? And seeing them like kind of amazingly just fall down a building, like fall down the side of a skyscraper with minimal impact to the game's performance, right? That kind of stuff is really shocking. Throughout playing Starfield, I've learned that like all of the planets and stuff have in some way, depending on whether or not they're based off of real places or not, if they are based off of real places, they tend to have orbits and revolutions that are accurate, right? And that is such a shocking thing to learn in Starfield that they do that. But the more you play BGS games, the more it makes sense. Like, yeah, of course they would do that. Why? I don't know, because there's not really any reason in the entire game why they would simulate it on that level, right? Truly, it feels like such a work of weird passion and enthusiasm, and I don't know, it's part of what suckers me in and why I keep coming back and enjoying their stuff, even when a lot of people regard it as like, oh, this is a bit of a miss or whatever, right? I cannot help but fall in love with that like soul that's there, right? And I'm so curious how it will be altered, right? I'm so curious how it will be altered. Anyway, like I said, I kind of have an idea of what to expect for Elder Scrolls 6, but for this, it's such a, to put it in its own engine like that, I don't know. I think it has the potential to really backfire, and a lot of people will be like, this isn't the Oblivion that I remember and all that. I totally think it has a possibility for that. And I think it's totally possible that I might be in that camp. But even in saying that, like I said, I cannot help but think about it and approach it from, like, at the very least, an academic level, right? Having put so much time into these games, I'm so just, like, morbidly curious, right? And I mean, you know, I can't also help but think of times when, you know, fans will do mock-ups of stuff like, here's Mario 64 running in Unreal Engine. And it's just like, hyper-realistic Mario and stuff. I took all these assets off of an asset store. Look at Mario hyper-realistically jumping on a Koopa, right? There's stuff like that. And I assume they're not going that route, right? Because truly, if we're regarding sort of games as art and like each one having a soul that was made by the development team at that point in time, I feel like nothing removes it more than sort of like, oh, here's my rendition of this old ass game in Unreal Engine, right? I'm a single person, right? Here's my mock-up of it. And I can't help but see some of those sometimes. I'm like, I'm so glad that this isn't real. I'm so glad that it is just a fun, fanciful thought that we're having, and this is not a reality. But I don't know. What if they did it? Surely they aren't. Surely they aren't actually going to do it in such a way, right? But hey, I cannot help but wonder. I'm so interested in it on a technical, mechanical level. I cannot wait to hear more technically minded people who are already familiar with like the ins and outs of the Gamebryo engine, of this version of BGS's engine. I want to hear people digging into it. I want to hear people talking about like, well, the Oblivion remaster remake in UE5, actually, it doesn't have a weirdly, freakishly detailed version of what all these goblin tribes are doing, right? For whatever reason, Bethesda Game Studios just thought, sure, what if we gave some weird, like, routines or whatever for these goblins and had them go about doing really just strange stuff in the background that 99% of our player base will never encounter. But somebody who dug into the files kind of found out the like through line of it. I can't imagine they'll have stuff like that in there, right? You know? I don't know. Like I said, that's part of the wonder of it myself. I am so endlessly curious about what they decide is part of the vision of playing the game and not. I don't know. Sorry, I'm waffling on so long about this. Like I said, I got a lot of thoughts about it on that level, right? God, just approaching it like I said, academically in that way. God, I'm so curious about it. All right, that we should probably call it here for now. Either way, look forward to it on the channel because man, it sure does sound like it exists. It 100% sounds like it's gonna happen. And I could not be more curious about it. And like I said, I'm very interested to hear people who are familiar with this stuff on a technical level talk about it. Anyway, that ought to do it for this week. As per usual, feel free to submit a question if you got one. Until next time, please take care of each other.